Welcome back to Anxiety Chats. We have another anonymous story for you today, and we are joined by co-host Leila today, who has been on this podcast before and shared her story of anxiety. This time we have a story about how this listener helped ease her anxiety through learning techniques from her therapist. If you would also like to share your anonymous story with us, head to the link in the description of wherever you're listening to this podcast, or you can come onto the podcast and chat with me in person to share your story. I would love to chat to you. And welcome, Leila.
Hi, it's good to be back.
It's good to have you back. It's lovely having you on. Me and Leila live like 5 minutes from each other, so we are actually real life friends.
We are not just podcasts.
Not just podcast friends. So yeah, it's nice we know each other's anxiety, and this story, I know that you've had help from therapists, and there's been, in fact, on the last episode, you might have mentioned that, you just feel really safe with your therapist and you feel really comfortable with them.
Yeah, I think it was, I'm not sure, I think I might have mentioned it on the episode, but we definitely had a conversation outside of the podcast where I think I said that I had a moment where I realised like my therapist is the one person that I could tell anything in the world to completely comfortably, and that's a really nice feeling.
It's like, I remember that moment, and it's hard to know whether things were said on the podcast or off the podcast, but I remember that, and it was kind of like a revelation for you, and it's nice when you see somebody having a revelation, and when you feel so unsafe in the world, having somebody you do feel safe with is just amazing.
Best. Definitely.
Yeah. So this reading is called Anxiety Curve, and the person also got help from their psychotherapist, and it's a positive psychotherapy story, which is nice. So I started getting anxiety attacks back in 2020 after a really bad alcoholic event. A lot of stuff happened. I thought my life would end week after week. Everything was just chaos for about 4 or 5 months. Then I got this psychotherapist who was taught in anxiety. He taught me everything I needed to know about anxiety. I learned about the anxiety curve, validating the right feelings and validating your anxiety, especially the anxiety attacks. Everything became easier when putting all of this knowledge to practice. My anxiety attacks were quite strong since I have death anxiety, so I would be screaming and panicking the heck out of believing I would definitely die. Though once I had that anxiety curve in my head, the next time an attack occurred, it was a little easier. And easier it became. Though for me, my anxiety is based on my situation, so there's no fixing that. But I'm so glad to have these tools to combat the horrible effects of anxiety. I just wanted to share my ways of countering it all. That's a really positive story in the end. I like that one a lot.
That's amazing, yeah.
And it's kind of similar to some of the stuff you've shared because, I really know how it feels, that person talking about, when it's really bad, how the anxiety can feel. It feels awful.
Definitely. When I was listening to that, I was actually thinking when I first started struggling with anxiety, I kind of felt like that. This was years and years ago, but yeah, so it definitely resonates a bit. And yeah, it's really nice to hear that that's helped going to see the therapist and they've helped them come around that curve. That's so nice.
100%. And I'm not 100% sure about anxiety curve. There's lots of different types. I've Googled it. Yeah. There's lots of different types of anxiety curve that psychotherapists talk about. But I believe in this situation, this person's talking about when, the anxiety peaks and then leaves. And that has been one of the things that's helped me massively, is knowing it will always leave, no matter what. Even when it feels like literally the worst, it will always leave. So I think that could be what this person's talking about. There's also another anxiety curve that this person could be talking about, which I found interesting after doing some research today, which was there's like 5 steps to it, and it's kind of like explaining that at somebody's peak level of anxiety, they cannot function in certain ways. So when somebody's in an actual crisis and experiencing peak panic, there's certain ways that other people that are supporting them can help them. It's really interesting if people that are listening, or you want to look it up, it's kind of like also when it's like 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 obviously being the peak of anxiety, there's different things you can do at levels 1, 2, and 3 to try and help this person by distracting them or by looking at other things. And it's particularly helpful with people with autism that, you know, might have sensory issues or neurodivergent in general. So I found it really interesting if anyone wants to look it up. I'm probably not explaining it very well, but anyway, I think,
I don't really know much about it, but yeah, no, that sounds good. I'll
it is
definitely look it up as
interesting.
well.
But I think this person's referring to the anxiety curve of like how it feels to have a panic attack, and also maybe sounds like, you know, being validated and their feelings being validated was like really important for them, which is so important.
Yeah, it's such like a simple thing somehow, but like it's very hard to find it and actually you feel like, because I definitely feel like that when I see my therapist, like, you know, I think it's so different, family, friends saying, you know, it's great saying things, but when a complete stranger, you tell them something and they're just like, that's fine. Like there's so many things about myself that I used to refer to as bad things. And people, I think, in my life have made me feel like those things were bad. And then when I went to see my therapist, she was just like, no, like, you know, and just completely validated me and made me feel so much better about it. And yeah, I think that is so important. And obviously what this person really needed
100%. That's
was
so
just
nice. Like,
someone to listen.
yeah, and bad. That's not something that should really be in our vocabulary when referring to stuff like that. Obviously, we all make mistakes and we can all do things that we regret or things that ways we could have acted better. But when there's parts of us that we think are bad parts and we feel embarrassed and stuff, that validation is so important. And, you know, this person experiencing death anxiety, which I've not experienced, I don't think I've experienced particularly death anxiety. And this person experiences, you know, quite strong reactions to the thought of death. And I can imagine that being a really hard one, because one of the things we know on this planet is that at some point we will all die. And there's not many definites in life, but this is a definite. And so I imagine it's a really hard type of anxiety to, you know, all the rest of the anxiety is like, it probably won't happen. It's going to be fine. You're just thinking of the worst case scenario. But I imagine this is particularly hard because there's no probably about it. And I feel even harsh saying that, but it's going to happen, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, yeah, like I say, I can kind of relate to this, and it's a weird feeling, I think. It's kind of, because I don't know, I mean, I feel like anybody, even if you don't have anxiety, you might fear dying, you know, which is completely fair, because obviously it's, again, we know it's going to happen, but we don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
So it's completely fair to be anxious about it. But yeah, obviously for some it can get to that point where it crosses over to the thought of just, yeah, where it's, sounds like this listener just completely, it just overcomes you.
Totally. And like, yeah,
I have, yeah.
I can totally imagine as well, like that it's just the complete unknown, and anxiety a lot of times about the unknown. And I wonder what would help this particular anxiety, because I know that death, in the UK anyway, is something that is quite like, we don't really talk about it. Like even at funerals and stuff, it's not something that, you know, it's kind of very fluffy. We talk about it very generally. It's not, I know that in other countries, like I spoke to an Italian woman once who said like, whoa, yeah, at funerals, we really go for it. You know, we really cry and we really let it out and we really talk about it. But I wonder if part of death anxiety could be, you know, it being so unknown and so you don't want to talk about it. And I know there's things called death cafes, which can really help people to talk about death and the uncomfortability around death and, you know, grieve and stuff like that. And, you know, this is such a hard anxiety this person's going through, and I'd love to know more about what could help.
Yeah, it would be really interesting. Like, obviously for them, it's really helped them having a therapist to get them through the anxiety curve and validate their feelings and, you know, make them feel seen. But yeah, it would be interesting to know what other ways you could sort of work through it, because it's really a difficult one definitely.
It is.
Like, it's all hard, but this is, can be very, very intense.
Totally. And I know that a lot of people, when they have panic attacks, they can feel like, and I wonder if that's part of what this person's explaining. They said that they believe that they would definitely die when they were having a panic attack, and they would be screaming, and it's such a horrible feeling, that feeling of like completely losing control, and the fact they were screaming and panicking and thinking they would definitely die. Of course that's your reaction. If you were feeling, I'm definitely going to die right now, of course that's not such a normal reaction to that thought and feeling. So that should be that shouldn't be a concern, I think. Like, but it's just that horrible feeling that so many of us have experienced, feeling like you're going to die, especially when you have death anxiety. I just imagine to be so tricky.
Yeah. And just, I think like like any anxiety attack, you just spiral out of control, and you're just then a million steps ahead, and it's just your mind just runs away with itself, and it's honestly awful. Like, it's so hard.
100%.
But it's really good. It's nice to hear a positive story about it. It's really nice.
It's so nice, and I feel like yours is probably one of them too, because it's also really nice from this person to hear a positive story of therapy that we can share in the podcast, because there's lots of stories of therapy, some positive, some negative, but I feel like we often share the negative because we want to get it out and we want to talk about it. But it's really nice to be able to share a positive therapy story, because there is loads of positive therapy stories out there, and Leila also has a positive therapy story. You still see your therapist and you love her.
I do. No, it's really interesting. I think therapy is such an interesting one, because I used to be so not against it, but the first time somebody sort of spoke to me about there's a possibility of going, I was like, no, I don't need therapy, and there's really weird stigma around it that obviously if things are really, really bad, then it can really, really help, but also like you can only go if you're at sort of breaking point, which is one of the problems. I think I was discussing this with my therapist actually, is in the UK with the NHS, when it gets to a certain point, if someone's sort of on the up after therapy, it's like, okay, you don't need therapy anymore, which is again another really kind of not entirely true. Like, I went back to therapy in January of this year, which is probably one of the best months of my entire life. And I remember my dad was like, why are you going back to therapy if things are good? And I was like, again, that's such a, we really need to get rid of that kind of, you can only go to therapy if things are awful. Because you can go to therapy anytime you want. And it is difficult, it works for some people, it doesn't. But I think if it can work for you, it can be really amazing.
Totally. Yeah, I really love that so much. And it's kind of like saying to somebody, you don't need to read that book because you already know stuff about that. Or you don't need to eat fruit and vegetables because you're already healthy. It's like, well, let's keep it healthy. Let's keep it good.
Exactly.
And
but I think that comes from the whole, you go to therapy, you fix yourself, which is not true,
Yes.
at all.
We don't need to fix ourselves.
But
we really don't. And anyone listening, even if you are really in the throes and the depths of anxiety, I totally understand that. And feeling like, at points I didn't want to open my blinds because it was too bright. I didn't want to, move in case it caused a panic attack. I didn't want, so many things. But honestly, there really is there's so much. You are able to get better. I hate saying that in a way as well, because it's not about getting better. It's not about fixing yourselves, but you can overcome the absolute horrible, dark place of anxiety and get to a different place of anxiety. I would say I'm still definitely not there. I don't know where this person is on their journey. Maybe they're still not fixed or recovered. They're two words that I don't usually like to use. But it's really not about that. That was something that really opened my eyes when I realised, oh wait, I'm whole right now. I'm cool right now. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm allowed to, do things right now. That's cool. I'm allowed to be happy with who I am. With anxiety, that was
Yeah.
such a beautiful revelation to me. And this person talks about lots of tools. It wasn't just the anxiety curve, but they got lots of tools from their therapist. So they didn't share any more tools. But was there any other tools, like specific tools you learned from your therapist that's helped you?
I think that kind of the validation definitely. But even now, I'll still have conversations with her and I'll say stuff like that and she'll say that. And she's like, it's really difficult somehow to apply it to yourself. Like I always think this with so many things. I would give my friends said advice, but I wouldn't take it myself. So I think it is just a kind of about having a little bit of like self-discipline in a way, like not being, overly harsh on yourself, but kind of, letting yourself have those boundaries that you think other people should have. And, but being kind with yourself as well. Like, if my friend was experiencing anxiety, if it was you, I wouldn't be saying to you, like, come on, like, get a grip. So why would I be like that with myself, kind of thing?
Totally.
Like compassion, self-compassion is kind of what that is, I suppose. I think that is something that's really been quite important. And I don't know, I think just kind of deciding, I think it's quite like, especially with anxiety, that like social anxiety, kind of what I've struggled with the most. I think actually figuring out, like, for a lot of the time I kind of felt, especially last year, I want to do this thing, but I feel like I can't do it because I'm so anxious and the idea of doing it, I just can't. And then kind of actually sitting down and being like, do I want to do these things? Like, or do I just sort of feel like I should do them a little bit? And kind of like, like maybe you're beating yourself up about it and feeling like you should want to do that because everybody else does that. Yeah. But actually, maybe you don't want to. And that's okay too. Like if you do, then fine. But if you don't, like, yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of a thing as well, of kind of like everyone's anxiety is different. And it's just finding out what kind of works for you, not what works for someone else, or what, it says online, or what the doctor tells you to do, or something like that. Like whatever works for you, that's enough.
Absolutely. Totally.
Like totally.
I love that. That's so great. And it's so great to have you on and sharing your parts of your positive therapy story. And I love your therapist for being so there for you and being so lovely. And to this person that shared their story, like, it's very brave to share your story and it's not easy. And it sounds like they've really gone through some tough times. And I'm so happy that they've found somebody that understands and can give them validation and has taught them new things. And it's just, I'm just so happy to know that they're really improving and getting on. And 2022 is when they started suffering with all this. That is fair. We can all say that is fair. 2020 was a rough one.
Well, again, it's like with the self-compassion thing, like, especially like everyone in the past few years has been through a lot of life up. So it's, like you say, it's totally fair to feel overwhelmed by that.
Totally. We were literally,
like, all your feelings.
Yeah, everything we knew was taken, and we didn't even know that could be taken. We didn't know that those things, we didn't know like a pandemic was an option, and suddenly it was, and we hadn't prepared. And it just shows as well, though, that you can't prepare for things, no matter how many times you try to think, well, if I can just think of every scenario that could possibly happen and how I would overcome it, then everything will be fine. Because there's things you can't, and we still managed to get through it. Everyone that's listening to this, we still managed to get through it. How cool is that? How resilient are we? And I had many tantrums during that time and was like, I can't do it, and found it really hard, like everyone. But we all did get through it, including this lovely listener.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's really difficult. I definitely felt like that too. I felt like the point of like, when is it going to end? Like, and I was the same, having many a breakdown about like, this is awful. Like, there's all these things I want to do and now I can't do them because of this. And, realistically, it's like, it's not your fault that it happened. It's
Absolutely.
happening to everyone as well.
Totally. 100%. It was so bizarre. So bizarre. And every single person listening went through a lockdown, went through a pandemic. How resilient. I just think that's amazing. And yeah. Thank you so much to the person that sent this story in. It's been great to chat about. And thank you so much, Leila, for coming on and chatting to us. It's been really nice to have you back.
That's been good to have that. Come back. Thank you for having me again.
Anytime. We really love having you. And if you're somebody listening that can relate to this story, or you have a different anxiety story you would like to share, you can share it either anonymously through the link in our description, or you can come on and chat to us. I'd really love to chat to any of you. And thank you everybody for listening today. We will see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.